law because the Biden administration agreed with the protesters and I think wanted those justices harassed at their home.
I really appreciate that you've now shifted the accusation you made earlier. Your accusation was that we were silent in the face of protests at Supreme Court justices' homes. Again, we joined together in a bipartisan way, not only to condemn that, but to pass legislation to extend round-the-clock security protection, literally days. It was introduced May 5th, passed the Senate in a bipartisan fashion on May 9th. So if you're saying that we didn't criticize
Did the
Merrick Garland,
DOJ arrest a single person under this law?
You are now changing the
No, that is what I said.
accusation
That is what I said.
Again, I'll pull the record.
Did the Biden DOJ arrest even one?
Again,
the answer is no.
My point to you is the accusation that the Democrats on this committee do not care.
Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he said, you have unleashed the whirlwind and you will pay the price. And not a single Democrat senator had a word to say about this. And so their outrage is selective. And I will give my colleague from New Jersey a chance to just answer a simple yes-no question. Should the Biden Justice Department have enforced the criminal law against protesting at a justice's home? Yes or no?
So the rank hypocrisy of Chuck Schumer apologizing the next day and you holding that standard for him and not for your president, who you actually rightfully described when you were running against him in a primary. I would love to run those tapes of how you perfectly talked about the danger of our president and his rhetoric. But now you are failing, in fact, blind to the very things you're accusing Chuck Schumer of. I don't think Donald Trump would know an apology if it hit him in the head. Never has said apologizing. So again, you are very, very, sir, very, very deep into the waters of hypocrisy in your criticisms of Chuck Schumer.
So let the record reflect that Spartacus did not answer the question and did not tell us whether the criminal law should be enforced because he knows the answer is yes. And he knows that the Biden Department of Justice was being wildly political and partisan in refusing to enforce the law because they disagreed with the Supreme Court justice's ruling.
This exchange isn't really about Ted Cruz or Cory Booker. It's about whether laws mean what they say when politics gets tense. Institutions don't fail all at once. They fail through exceptions, delays, and silence disguised as process. And when enforcement becomes a matter of convenience, the damage doesn't show up in headlines. It shows up in public trust, and it's very hard to rebuild.
Justice or with the intent or of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty. Pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. That is federal criminal law. Night after night after night, angry mobs were outside the Supreme Court justices' homes, and in the entire course of it, the Biden Justice Department prosecuted nobody. We had the Attorney General sitting at that table, and multiple Republican senators asked him, why are you not enforcing the law? What they are doing is a crime. And my friend from New Jersey said, it is a lie to condone this. I would challenge, my friend, find a single Democrat senator on this committee holding the Attorney General to account for not enforcing this law.
There's a moment in Washington hearings where the argument stops being about the policy and starts being about whether anyone is actually responsible for enforcing the law. Not writing it, not voting for it, but enforcing it when it's politically inconvenient. That's the tension that defines this exchange, not left versus right, but accountability versus deflection. And it matters because when the rules are optional for the people in charge of enforcing them, they're optional for everyone else. That's the backdrop for a heated clash in the Senate Judiciary Committee between Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Cory Booker, a debate that exposes how institutions protect themselves when enforcement gets uncomfortable. Senator Cruz states, it is a crime under federal law to protest at a judge's home, and the Department of Justice has prosecuted 0 people for it. That line lands hard, not because it's theatrical, but because it's specific. A statute is named, an enforcement agency is named, and the alleged number is 0. This is where the argument stops being ideological and becomes structural. For ordinary Americans, this resonates for a simple reason. Most people don't get discretion when they violate federal law. They don't get press statements, they get consequences.
When Judge Anderol was killed in New Jersey, the Republican colleagues in the Senate, their outpouring of support, their outpouring of concern, they're willing to work together on a bipartisan bill was extraordinary. It shows the truth of this institution. It's, despite some of the fiery rhetoric that you were sowing, we're really a bipartisan, working bipartisanship. Cornyn and Coons, after the incidents you're talking about, got together and actually passed a bill to better protect our Supreme Court justices, many of whom are friends of ours. You know, Gorsuch and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I knew his wife before he did. We studied together at Oxford. This implication that there was silence when there were threats on their people's houses is absolutely absurd. I remember the rhetoric and the comments, the concern from Coons. I actually distinctly remember you, Chairman, on more than once condemning those attacks on Republican-appointed jurists. To say things like that feeds just the partisanship in this institution and feeds the fiery rhetoric. And it's just plain not true. It's just plain not true. And I think